I'm pleased to share another conversation in my series on how clinicians and technology are coming together to reimagine the patient experience and in doing so save and improve lives. And today, I'm joined by Dr. Navin Kapur, a cardiologist and a leading global expert in acute mechanical circulatory support, cardiogenic shock, and the science of cardiac unloading. And just a few months ago, after years of helping patients as a world-renowned cardiologist and heart failure specialist at Tufts School of Medicine, he officially joined the Johnson & Johnson MedTech team as our Chief Medical and Scientific Officer for Heart Recovery, a true pioneer in the field. And so, Dr. Kapur, firstly, we are so grateful to have you as part of our team, and thank you so much for joining us today. To start, please tell us a bit about yourself and what brought you into the field of cardiology.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you about this. So I began my journey in cardiovascular medicine as a medical student. Original intent was to be a psychiatrist, if you can imagine that. But I started to fall in love with cardiovascular physiology, which really tapped into fundamental basic biology combined with hemodynamics, hydraulics, bringing in principles of physics, as well as chemistry and biology all together. And so cardiovascular physiology really got me very excited. As I started to look at different career paths, I began to become enamored with cardiac surgery, performing a lot of cardiac surgery research, working with some of the more advanced surgeons in the field at the time, and spoke with them about my career trajectory. And the counterintuitive advice I received was to consider looking at interventional cardiology because they believed that would be the future of invasive procedures. And so I spent a few months with some interventional cardiologists, and it also became apparent to me that interventionalists were learning their best skills from cardiac surgery and then learning to apply them with the right tools. And that's where my interest in MedTech began. And so for that reason, I started a journey towards interventional cardiology. And so as I started to look at the cath lab environment in the mid-2000s, it became apparent that the majority of patients entering the cath lab had heart failure, yet the interventional dictionary didn't really include all of the same language that our heart failure colleagues were using. And at that time, durable LVADs were coming into play into our clinical practice. So I realized there was a gap in terms of what interventionalists were understanding about heart failure. So to become a 360 physician, it felt like it was my imperative to train in advanced heart failure and cardiac transplant medicine before embarking on my interventional cardiology training.
Well, thank you for sharing that story, Dr. Kapur. And I must say that I think I can confidently speak on behalf of countless patients that we are grateful that you chose the field of interventional cardiology. Now, you've been at the forefront of advancing care for patients with heart failure and cardiogenic shock. What continues to drive your passion for innovation in this particular field?
Yeah, I think what drives my passion is the needs of our patients. We see it worldwide. We see it on a daily basis. When I came to Tufts University School of Medicine, it was a unique environment because it's a fairly small hospital, but they were conducting a lot of clinical care for advanced heart failure and cardiogenic shock patients. So some of the sickest patients throughout New England were being referred there. And what became also very apparent during that time were all the gaps, both the gaps in terms of device therapies that were available, as well as drug therapies. And the environment there at Tufts was very unique because they allowed me to be an interventional cardiologist as well as a heart failure specialist and to run a basic science research laboratory. So that allowed us to go one step more basic in our understanding of fundamentals for our patients with heart failure and cardiogenic shock who are in the cath lab. And that combination on a daily basis is something I used to call operating and innovating, because we were being asked to essentially cobble together whatever tools we had to take care of the sickest patients, patients with hemodynamic compromise, patients with whom we didn't know the trajectory of their heart recovery, whether that was even possible, and for many patients for whom there was no exit option if they were declined by cardiac surgery. And so these are some very sick patients with limited options at the time. Around the same time, as the LVAD population was growing, this was when percutaneous hemodynamic support was being introduced into clinical practice. And at that time, there was really a limited understanding of how these devices, like the Impella 2.5, might impact physiology or biology. And so by combining the basic lab with the cath lab, with the heart failure unit and the shock environment, it created a substrate for us to really take a deep dive into the understanding of these devices from a scientific as well as clinical perspective. And so that's what drove my interest. And it was around that time that I started to interact with companies from around the world, one of them being Abiomed. But one thing that made Abiomed unique was that they were constantly listening to the physician and to the patients and then innovating their technology. Year after year, I would watch them innovate and continue to deliver more cutting edge technologies. And that's really something that I think continues to drive my passion today, is finding the sickest patient in any hospital and ultimately figuring out where the gaps are and where we can help.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kapur. And while you may have started in a smaller hospital setting, the impact you've had in advancing the work we do, not only in support of patients here in the United States, but across the world, has been remarkable. And so thank you for that. And maybe building on that, you've contributed significantly to the science behind cardiac unloading and Impella heart pumps. Tell us about that journey and what makes Impella so unique and special.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a really interesting question. This part of the journey began because there were really limited understanding of these technologies. These technologies were being built, applied into very sick patients, and we were learning, as I said, while operating. Having a patient decline for bypass surgery and also not being an option for complex coronary intervention is a great example. We used to start these cases and watch the patient deteriorate during the case and then apply the Impella after deterioration had set in. And it was like playing chess, but then playing speed chess, where you had to make very calculated strategic moves in a very quick manner. And the problem is when you do things in that rapid manner, sometimes things can be missed. So for that reason, we started to preemptively use the Impella device in patients who we thought were at high risk for deterioration. And then a whole area of science emerged about identifying who is that high-risk patient, what are those prognostic indicators. The same thing was happening in our heart failure patients, understanding who might deteriorate, who might need support. Many patients who are not considered transplant candidates because of right heart failure were then also supported by the right-sided Impellas and those technologies, and identifying those patients became a challenge. And then similarly in the cardiogenic shock arena, where you have the most limited amount of time to make decisions and you need technologies in a rapid manner, we could see that the effects of innovation were very palpable. The smallest widget could actually lead to a completely different trajectory for a patient outcome, which has an impact not only on the patient's lives, but also on the lives of their families and friends. And that was something that I got to experience and was fortunate to experience on a day-to-day basis. It continues to drive me today, and it aligns with what drives Abiomed, because they celebrate their patients, but they recognize their losses. And I think the losses are the ones that drive us to continue to innovate for the future.
Well said. And as you know, one of the main drivers behind Johnson & Johnson's decision to acquire Abiomed was exactly that patient-first mentality. And I think that we're not done. We are committed to continuing to work with key opinion leaders like you and many others to continue to innovate for patients. And I think, yes, with that in mind, how do you see Impella evolving to meet new clinical challenges?
Well, I think Johnson & Johnson acquiring Abiomed was probably one of the most exciting changes in the field of cardiovascular medicine. It started to take a company that was going in the right direction and now accelerate its progress globally and in many, many ways. So the Impella pipeline is extremely deep. The expertise of the company with decades of engineering expertise certainly puts the pipeline at the forefront. What I also find amazing with the company is the ability of the engineers to continuously adapt and anticipate what the future looks like 5 to 10 years from now. I think the Impella pipeline itself will continue to evolve. The opportunities are quite clear: heart failure, cardiac surgery, interventional therapies for most complex patients. I think will always be in the foresight of these types of technologies. I think what we'll also see is stronger focus on those heart failure patients and new technologies for those patients. So I think that's where I think Johnson & Johnson combined with Abiomed leads to an immense opportunity for the future, and the opportunity to find the sickest patient anywhere on the globe, which I think is really one of the greatest opportunities, and provide care for that patient.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kapur. I love your story earlier about being at a crossroads and deciding cardiology over in psychiatry. And obviously, you've recently joined Johnson & Johnson MedTech as Chief Medical and Scientific Officer for heart recovery. Clearly a big decision for you personally and professionally. From your perspective, what inspired this decision to take on this new role?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I am glad that I at least took a few classes in psychiatry. It prepared me well for a career in many directions. The opportunity to me, in a way, was a bit of a calling, and I mean that with all sincerity. Just like it was a calling to become a physician, just like it was a calling to become an interventional heart failure cardiologist, the calling was becoming more apparent to me on a daily basis. I was taking care of critically ill patients. I was providing lectures and teaching other hospitals how to do or think about things the way my laboratory was generating data. And I realized that the opportunity to now expand that reach around the globe when J&J acquired Abiomed was becoming more and more apparent to me. I also aligned very much with the credo of J&J. I found that to be also very resonant with my own personal mission to take care of the sickest of the sick, and also to heal, to innovate, and to empower those around me. And I think that's really what drew me to the opportunity to lead. And as you know very well, as a leader, that does require us to be constantly thinking about everyone around us. And so the opportunity to put all of the folks in the Chief Medical Science Office position, it's less about those titles and it's all about the people in the organization. And so when I had the opportunity and the opportunity was defined for me, it became very apparent that this would have an impact or potentially allow me to have an impact in many ways. And so that's why I had to take the opportunity, and I'm grateful for that opportunity and look forward to executing the function.
Well, thank you. Every career change comes with some risk, and we are just so grateful that you took that jump. I think you also know that while we're so proud of the progress that we've made with Abiomed, it's mostly patients here in the United States that get to benefit from this technology. And so leveraging J&J's global scale to bring this to more physicians and more patients around the world is imperative work that we've just got to execute against. And so thank you. Maybe in closing, Dr. Kapur, what excites you most about the future of cardiovascular care?
Well, I think there's a lot of immense opportunities coming down the pipe to basically help patients. What I'm excited about really spans the gamut, but I think heart failure is in scope. This really is an exciting space because it is challenging as a substrate. There are many different phenotypes and subphenotypes that remain to be defined. The physiology and the mechanical challenges are also very palpable, but yet it is also one of the most devastating conditions worldwide that continues to grow, and it's multifactorial in its nature. So the opportunity with J&J to combine drug and device therapy for these patients allows us to tackle both the mechanical and the physiologic aspects of heart failure together. So I think there's going to be a fantastic opportunity over the next decade to see where drugs and device combine.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kapur, and I love the fact that you referenced, broader J&J, because at the end of the day, we're not a pharmaceutical company or just a medical technology company. We're a healthcare company. And I do think those two aspects together put us in a really unique position to do so much more to help patients around the world. And so thank you again for your time today, for taking the opportunity to speak with me, and for, most importantly, all you do for our customers and for patients. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.